Before we start the video, I'm going to give you a second to pause the video and visualize what life in the ocean looks like to you. So I'd be willing to bet no one thought of phytoplankton. Although they're invisible to the naked eye, these water-dwelling microbes are arguably one of the most important organisms on planet Earth. Phytoplankton themselves are a very diverse group of organisms. Phytoplankton can consist of photosynthetic eukaryotes such as protists or even prokaryotes like cyanobacteria. Phytoplankton usually inhabit the upper layers of marine and freshwater environments called the euphotic zone. The euphotic zone is usually defined as anything above 200 meters in depth, and the reason phytoplankton live here is because of their photosynthetic nature, and they need access to light that is not present in the deeper parts of the water past 200 meters. The presence of phytoplankton and their photosynthetic nature is actually a big reason why the oceans are one of the most important buffers in the fight against global climate change, and this is due to their role in the global carbon cycle. The global carbon cycle details how carbon moves throughout the atmosphere and both oceanic and terrestrial environments. But for today's video, we will focus on the oceanic side of the carbon cycle. Due to both human activity and natural events, carbon is fairly prevalent in the atmosphere as carbon dioxide. Through photosynthesis, phytoplankton are able to turn this biologically useless carbon into useful sugars and oxygen. And this oxygen also assists in the oxygenation of water for other forms of life. These phytoplankton-produced sugars are especially important because they form the foundation of most aquatic ecosystems on Earth. And as the phytoplankton are eaten by other organisms, such as other plankton, fish, and even young sea turtles, they pass on the carbon to these animals, which are then in turn eaten by predators, which can then be eaten by apex predators, which then creates a chain that passes along this carbon that was originally generated by the phytoplankton. Despite phytoplankton's role in the global carbon cycle, and role as a primary producer and the foundation of every marine and aquatic ecosystem on Earth, how does this affect us? Currently, we are losing phytoplankton at an alarming rate. Estimates show that we have lost 40% of these vital microbes since 1950 to the present date. That means we have lost almost 50% of our global phytoplankton population in under 100 years. This global loss of phytoplankton is believed to be caused by human-influenced climate change. Due to phytoplankton's role in the carbon cycle, this loss of phytoplankton creates a worrying climate-positive feedback loop. As global temperatures continue to rise, more phytoplankton will be lost, increasing the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere because not as many phytoplankton will be able to fix that carbon from the atmosphere. And in turn, this more carbon in the atmosphere will increase global temperature exponentially, killing off more and more phytoplankton. Climate change has already affected us humans in many ways. If we continue to lose phytoplankton due to human-influenced climate change, one of the best carbon sinks and way of reducing greenhouse gas will collapse. If we continue on this path, an increasing amount of people will be affected due to more extreme weather and temperatures due to climate change. Losing phytoplankton can only serve to accelerate this negative change. As mentioned earlier, phytoplankton form the base of the majority of aquatic ecosystems as a primary producer and are the food source for an enormous number of organisms, who in turn are the food for many more. If the global loss of phytoplankton continues, we could see a collapse of most marine and freshwater ecosystems, as without the base of primary productivity from phytoplankton, the whole ecological pyramid collapses. With less phytoplankton to eat, the level above phytoplankton on the ecological pyramid will starve and die off, and soon the same will happen to the levels above it as well. To put this into perspective, this would be like removing all the plants in a forest so the herbivores would have nothing to eat, and soon the carnivores would also have nothing to eat. Partial or full ecological collapse of the ocean's ecosystems due to loss of phytoplankton would affect developing nations the most, as a lot of developing countries rely on the relative ease of fishing to feed their ever-growing populations. With the partial or full collapse of oceanic ecosystems, we could possibly see famines on a level never seen before in the developing world as millions starve. On a more positive note, looking towards the future, things are hopeful. Many organizations and scientific papers are busy raising awareness for our relatively unknown microbes, the phytoplankton. With combating global climate change being quite a popular topic in scientific and political conversations, we can hopefully change our current trajectory.